Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first of our live stream events for WorkSafe Month. This is our final week of WorkSafe Month, the week ending, of course, with the two-day conference and the awards dinner Friday night. So our first session is titled Education and Awareness of Drugs and Alcohol in the Workplace. It is Maria Duggan that will be presenting this online session. Maria has worked as an educator with the Drug Education Network for 3.5 years and completed a Masters in Public Health. Maria's focus is on prevention approaches related to alcohol and drug misuse. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Pam. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you today about this really important issue. And yes, so it's WorkSafe Month, and it seems like a really great opportunity to talk about how workplaces can address drug and alcohol misuse. And so this session that I'm going to present today is basically going to look at how good prevention efforts can deliver not only a safer workplace, but also a healthier and more productive workplace. And I just also need to let you know, the screen you're looking at, you'll see that it's not a full screen. We've had a slight technical hitch with the PowerPoint. So bear with us. You get to see a little preview of the upcoming slides as we go through. So the session in a bit more detail. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Drug Education Network, or DEN, as it's also known. And I'm going to cover the most common drugs that we know cause the most harm in our community and in workplaces. I'm going to look at the idea of prevention and what that means around drug misuse, and also drill down a little on costs and benefits for prevention. And then I'm going to talk you through a few key strategies around policy, education, communication, and also workplace culture. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a prototype training program that a DEN team member has developed called Elephant Training, and how that is a program that you may be interested in implementing in your workplace to address alcohol and drug misuse. I'm also going to touch on workplace drug testing and those best practice considerations around how you can do, if you are already doing workplace drug testing or your workplace needs to implement that, what are some of the best practice considerations to take into account. And also, because DEN's core business is around resource development, I'll be showcasing a few resources that may be relevant for your workplace as far as doing good workplace prevention. So the Drug Education Network, we are celebrating our 30th year of operation this year. We're going to be having a little party at Parliament House next month to celebrate that, and the mocktails will be flowing. And we'll be also launching a new website and an updated version of our current website, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But our vision is essentially around improving health and wellbeing of community members, and that's through providing good information and resources and training, not only for community, but also for schools, for sporting clubs, and of course workplaces. And prevention, I guess, you know, it's a word that's bandied around a lot these days, and in the context of alcohol and drugs, it's a real key strategy for really helping to address a lot of issues that we've heard anecdotally that people talk to us about. And I'll relate a couple of examples. A manager was talking to me about a staff member who presented to work. He was going to be delivering a training, and she could smell alcohol on his breath. And she had a conversation with this staff member about the fact that he was about to go and deliver training, and, you know, this is a bit of a problem. Well, this staff member didn't really consider that this was a problem. He hadn't been drinking that day, but he had been drinking the night before, and he was still intoxicated. So the manager was at a loss as to how to explain to this employee, well, actually that's really not okay. And I guess what we see is that a workplace has a really great opportunity to communicate good policy and information to staff to prevent these kinds of situations occurring. Not only is there risk to that employee around their own health and safety, but there's also risk to that organisation's brand as well. And the Drug Education Network, we have a position statement around drugs, and basically we acknowledge that drug use exists, and that's irrespective of legal or societal norms. And we don't condone or condemn drug use. Instead, we aim to provide our community members with resources and information to keep themselves safer in relation to their individual circumstances. And I guess it's this and our vision that informs the prevention work that we aim to do in workplaces and other organisations. So with that, we're really looking at a harm minimisation approach, and we see that links very closely with prevention. How can we support workplaces to deliver programs that are going to minimise and prevent harm to their staff and other employees that might be affected by an employee's drug misuse? And we know that this is an emerging issue and one that's of increasing concern in Tasmania. So recently, the peak body, the TCCI, invited their members to report on what are the issues around illicit drug use and also alcohol abuse. So it is front and centre at the moment as far as an issue that workplaces are grappling with. So what drugs are we talking about? So of course, crystal methamphetamine, that is a drug that's been gaining a lot of media attention recently. And we also have cannabis, ecstasy, which is also a form of an amphetamine type stimulant. So these illegal drugs are causing issues for a lot of people. Then we have the legal drugs, tobacco, alcohol and prescription medications. And if you were to have a look at the harms that are caused as a result of these drugs for people in Tasmania and around the country, you can see that stat there. So alcohol caused over 5,000 deaths and 157,000 plus hospitalisations in 2010. And in comparison, in 2011, there were 101 deaths associated with methamphetamine. So if we look at the data around who is using what drugs, we'll drill down into that a little bit further. But this data that we have at the moment is from the recent 2013 Australian Household Drug Survey. And so what that information there is telling us is that 2 in 5 people in Australia smoked tobacco, drank alcohol at risky levels, or used an illicit drug. And we also have the situation where people living in more remote parts of Australia have a much higher rate of misuse and also harm as a result of these drug use. And we also know that the drug use patterns generally reflect national trends, although I will talk a bit more about smoking in Tasmania and how that is slightly higher than average. But if we look at this map here, it gives us an idea of this remoteness classification. So Tasmania is defined as being largely in the outer regional and remote classification. And so this has an interesting bearing on levels of alcohol or risky alcohol consumption, as you can see from this graph here. So if you have a look at, we're looking at outer regional here, and this is showing the difference from 2010 to 2013. So outer regional, this is mainly Tasmania. We're mainly classified as outer regional. So we've got quite high levels of risky drinking happening. And this is for lifetime risky drinkers. For single occasion risk, if we look at this outer regional classification, we're up around 35%. So, and I'll just let you know that the definition of lifetime risky drinking, in case you didn't know, is more than 2 standard drinks on any one day. So we might think that that's not very much, but in the context of harm over the course of a lifetime, the NHMRC, National Health Medical Research Council, they've defined that as being risky levels of drinking. And single occasion risk, so this definition here, this is more than 4 standard drinks on one single occasion. So what we're seeing is that we have quite, in these kinds of regions, quite high levels of risky and lifetime risky drinking. This graph here is showing us recent illicit use of drugs. And so Tasmania, if we look here, for cannabis is around 12%. And the stat is related to recent illicit use of drugs, people aged 14 or older. For ecstasy, it's pretty similar to other states. Northern Territory is the one that seems to lead the country in most of these stats. Cocaine, around 2%. Methamphetamines, so we're looking at slightly over 4%. And this is for the whole group, so not just crystal meth, but this includes all amphetamine type stimulants. And then we have pharmaceuticals, and so we're looking at around 6% for that. Now, what we also know, with the general trends that have shown up in the household survey data, is that these stats are have relatively remained the same as far as illegal drug use. So they haven't really changed that much from 2010 to 2013. There is currently a survey happening this year, and we'll get the findings from that more recent survey sometime early next year. But the interesting thing to be aware of, and has a lot of relevance for workplaces, is that pharmaceutical misuse has actually gone up. So that is one drug, a legal drug, but there is certainly misuse and illegal misuse of that drug, and we're seeing an increase in the misuse of that and the harms that are associated that are showing up in workplaces. So if we look at, well, what is actually the problem in terms of costs to Australian workplaces? So we've got some stats here, and you can see an estimated $6 billion per year in lost productivity, and about 2.5 million days lost annually due to AOD use, with a cost of more than 680 million. The other key aspect, I guess, around the problem related to AOD misuse or alcohol and drug misuse is the fact that workers are reporting, that they're experiencing negative effects as a result of a co-worker's misuse of alcohol, or reduced ability to do your job, have been involved in accidents or close calls, or worked extra hours to cover for a co-worker. If we focus on methamphetamine use, and this is giving a bit of a profile around what would be considered a high-risk workforce. So this is what the research is telling us as far as who is predominantly using methamphetamine. So, and just to kind of give you also that idea that methamphetamine includes powder, but what we have seen in the last few years is a switch from, or a shift from using powder to the crystal methamphetamine, the ice form, which is much more potent. So within this kind of estimate of around 2% of the population around Australia that are using methamphetamine, this is a shift that we've seen to using this more potent form. And so we're seeing that predominantly we have workers in this age group, predominantly males, and in blue-collar industries. And so you can see there that wholesale, construction, mining, manufacturing and hospitality are the industries where we're seeing a predominance of this drug being used. But just kind of keep it in perspective that it's still only about 2% of the population. But what we've also seen, so this is an analysis that was conducted by the National Centre for Education, Training and Addiction. They had a look at the harms that are seen in the workplace in relation to methamphetamine and compared that to other illicit drugs. And you can see from the stats there that injury is certainly an issue of concern. So you have significantly higher rates of absenteeism due to injury for people who are using methamphetamine. There's also slightly higher rates of absenteeism due to illness, drug use, and also alcohol use. So where there's that polydrug use happening. Using at work, so again, it's 10%, but it's significantly higher than other illicit drugs. And working under the influence, at least once in the past 12 months, we have 31% of people using under the influence. So these stats are fairly concerning, and I guess what I'm going to talk about as we go through is, so how can a workplace address and prevent these issues from escalating or getting worse? So the other thing to consider too is this idea of a dual diagnosis or comorbidity. And so quite often people who have substance misuse issues going on will also have mental health issues happening as well. And so that stat there that tells us that 50 to 75% of people presenting for substance abuse also have a mental health issue. What we also know is that women will tend, as a general rule of thumb, to present more often with mental health issues, but will not present so often if they have a substance use issue. And we believe that that's around perceptions of stigma and concerns about family, about child protection and so on. But these are all barriers for people as far as getting the help that they need. We also know that it's a very low percentage of people, if they have a dual diagnosis, actually do get the help that they need. So there are real barriers related to stigma and perceptions of exclusion, social exclusion, that prevent people from getting the assistance that they need when they need it. So why would we consider prevention approaches in the workplace? We've just had a look at, what's happening with drug misuse in Australia and Tasmania, but why would we consider it to be a valid approach? Well, I guess there's a few key aspects, and the idea that health and wellbeing culture is protective. And what I mean by that is that it reinforces positive social norms about healthy behaviours, and that in turn reduces risk factors for drug misuse. And social norms, what we also know is that the message around workplace safety is very acceptable to workforces these days. So people really take that message on board and they get that. And so when you're doing a program, especially in relation to alcohol and drugs, that really focuses on the idea of workplace safety and safety for all staff, this message is very well accepted. The other thing is that it's cost effective, and as far as information and communication and education and resources that I'm going to showcase to you, it is a really cost effective way of actually providing really good information to your staff. The other thing is that, a high proportion of people who are working are using drugs. We may think, oh, it's only unemployed people, or it's only a particular, group of disadvantaged people. But in fact, drug use in the workplace is a reflection of the drug use that's happening in our community. And so when people are in the workplace, there is this opportunity to be able to reinforce those positive social norms and healthy behaviours and provide really good information and education. And that opportunity can be seen as talking about the fact that there are treatment options available for people. Especially we know that in relation to methamphetamine that people tend to postpone or consider it a barrier as far as wanting to get treatment. But the workplace can be an opportunity to reinforce that, yes, treatment is available. And I'll show you an example of a message that you can potentially use in your workplace. And obviously there are occupational health and safety imperatives as well around reinforcing a prevention approach in the workplace. And this is really important for meeting those occupational health and safety requirements. What we also know is that those behaviours and messages that people take on board in the workplace are transferable. So they go back out into the community and people share that information with family, friends and other peers. So if we talk about social norms, here is an example of a couple of really successful programs that are really resonating. And that top message there, I'm sure everyone's familiar with this: real mates don't let mates drink and drive. And this has really resonated for young men. They were the target for this particular campaign. And if I had $1 for every time I saw a young fella walking down the street with one of those real mates caps, so, they've done really well on the merchandising as well. And it's really reinforcing this message. It's not okay to drink and drive, and mates are here to help us you know, not do that. Take the keys, do the really bad selfies. And Are You OK is another campaign. So that's really, I mean, that's around mental health, but it's also about reinforcing those social, positive social norms about it's really important and it's really okay to talk about mental health. And so we see more and more campaigns out in the public domain these days that are really reinforcing these messages, and we can apply a similar approach in our workplaces. So, wellness, it is a bit of a buzzword, and I guess as far as how we see that playing out in the workplace, I would argue that if you are going to develop a healthy workplace culture, that is really going to go a long way to supporting healthier choices and healthier behaviours, not only around drinking more water, doing exercise, eating healthily, but also generally taking on board healthier behaviours around drug misuse. And what we also know is that a healthier workplace really reinforces that sense of an employee being validated and valued. And so all of these things translate into healthier behaviours overall. And if we look at the actual return on investment, there have been some studies done, and these are around smoking cessation. And I know that as far as workplace safety, this is not specifically a core issue, but it links in with this idea of healthy workplace. So in 2010, a Harvard Business Review showed that Johnson & Johnson, large corporation in the States, their employees stopped smoking. They had a 2/3 reduction in smoking in that organisation. What they found was that high blood pressure declined by more than 50%. But the payoff for Johnson & Johnson was that they estimated there was a cumulative savings of around $250 million on healthcare costs over the subsequent 10 years. So yes, this is a large corporation, but they also found that from 2002 to 2008, the return was $2.70 for every dollar spent on health and wellness programs. And the Harvard study then went on to look at general kind of wellness initiatives and what they can save an employer. And what they found was that an employer, if they spent an average of $394 per employee per year, the programs only cost an average of $159 per employee per year, creating a return on investment of $3.30 for every dollar spent. So as far as the value of implementing healthy workplace programs, I guess you can see that there is some tangible benefits for not only improving your workforce health, but also safety as well. And it also links in with retaining your workforce. We all recognise the cost. If we have a workforce that maybe are dealing with a drug issue and not able, or trying to deal with a drug issue and not able to adequately deal with that in a workplace setting, and they move on, or perhaps they're caught with, they're intoxicated and they move on and leave that workplace, there are also those costs associated with training a new staff member. So if we look at policy, policy is a really, really important place to start as far as communicating and preventing the problems in the workplace that are so important to avoid, especially in relation to injuries and accidents. So here are some suggestions around what would your policy look like if you wanted to prevent issues in the workplace. And perhaps your workplaces already have alcohol and drug policies, or you're thinking about drafting up an alcohol and drug policy. You might want to just run the tape over it and have a think about, are there any aspects that maybe we're missing here? So firstly, employer expectations, and an induction process is a really, really great place to go through your expectations about what you would expect from your staff in relation to their role in your workplace. And I guess this is really important because it helps to overcome any assumptions. It may be that some people believe, oh, well, I might have a bit of alcohol in my system, but I'm not impaired. Well, maybe your zero tolerance policy says, no, you cannot have any alcohol or drugs in your system. And it's about being really clear about that so people have no doubt in their mind as to what your expectations are. How are you going to manage risk? So being able to have a detailed approach in your policy around health and safety risks for your staff. How are you actually going to communicate your policy to your staff members? Will this be through newsletters? Will it be just in the induction process? We would recommend that it needs to be an ongoing process, that you're always reminding staff and providing information and resources. What is the scope of your policy? Is it going to apply just to staff on site? What if you have consultants coming onto the site, or guests or visitors? Will your policy apply to them as well? What about actually approaching staff if they have been identified as being intoxicated or under the influence? How will you do that, and how will you do that safely? Den also delivers training around reducing escalating behaviours, and you can certainly get in touch with us about how to go about doing that and providing that training for your staff. And then also there are reporting considerations and also counselling. So are you going to be really upfront and let your staff know that counselling is an option for them in relation to alcohol and drug misuse? And what are your disciplinary procedures? So as far as communicating to your staff, it can be as simple as just putting posters up and really being very clear about, you know, for example, we don't smoke here. And if you want to support your staff in cutting back on their smoking or quitting their smoking, the Department of Health and Human Services do provide a workplace smoking cessation kit. So if you check out their website, they can provide that resource for you and that support. And I guess, you know, the stats on smoking in Tasmania, we're looking at around 19% at the moment of daily and occasional smoking. And that's from a public health survey released in 2014. And that compares with the national average of 16%. So we still have a way to go as far as supporting people's health and reducing absenteeism, reducing time off work from chronic respiratory issues from people who are chronic smokers. So this poster here, this is really interesting. There's a couple of things I want to sort of talk to about this one. So you've probably seen in relation to methamphetamine a number of advertisements that talk about the meth face. You might have seen some of those, which what we actually know, those campaigns, they're using scare tactics which are actually not effective at all so far as encouraging people to get treatment or get support. So this, So this one here, you can see we've got that kind of meth face thing going on, but there are a lot of other aspects around this information that I really like. So, you know, it's obviously for a worker, so it's targeting the workforce in that construction industry. And it's really highlighting, well, do you need help? Because treatment works. It's also giving some great harm minimisation messages there as well. So these are the kind of resources that you may want to consider. Well, maybe I can make them available in my induction package for my staff. Or maybe our workplace will consider being really upfront about how we're going to communicate around drug misuse, and not sweep it under the carpet and keep it hidden, but actually really face up to, yep, okay, this is an issue that's in our community, and we as a workplace really want to encourage people, if they're experiencing issues, that they know where to get support. So a really, really key prevention strategy, and about targeting staff in a way that's going to resonate with them. So the next slide is looking at another issue which I mentioned earlier around prescription medications. So we know that there's been quite a substantial increase in harms from prescription medications. And I guess when we think about drugs, our minds will tend to go to the illegal drugs. You know, they will tend to think about meth or cannabis, for example. novel psychoactive substances which are in the media at the moment. But prescription medications, especially when combined with alcohol, so if you have painkillers and sedatives and alcohol, huge increased risk of overdose. And the other risks around that in the workplace as well is about impaired performance. So, you know, much increased risk of injury in the workplace as well when people are under the effects, the sedative effects of painkillers and sedatives, and if they also have alcohol in their system. So this is a really great message because it's helping people to understand and recognise the risks around increased risk of overdose from that polydrug use, and really thinking about, well, how do I make sure that I'm taking the right dose? So as far as resources for the workplace, we have also developed this resource, and it really focuses on such issues as a zero tolerance policy. And we have designed this resource, so it's a YouTube clip, with varying literacy levels in mind. So the idea is that it's available for people, it's using very minimal text and a lot of imagery, so it plays through and images come into each of those slides. And so we want it to be really kind of accessible. And we see that this could be a really useful tool that people could use, workplaces could use, in an induction process, for example, or for existing staff. It goes for about 6.5 minutes, and it also goes through and explains about stimulant drugs and depressant drugs. So it gives an overview of how those different drugs work. It also talks about standard drinks. So it gives people an idea of, well, how do I know that I will be okay to turn up for work and that I can be quite confident that I don't have alcohol in my system? So it talks about, you know, processing alcohol in the body. If you've had a certain number of standard drinks, how long is that going to take before it's cleared from the system? It also goes into, as you can see, it gives a brief overview around prescription medications, cannabis, and also speed and crystal methamphetamine. And it also links in with, well, when people are experiencing problems, it recommends some numbers and places that people can get in touch if they need that support. So if you want to check out this resource and you want to make it available to your workplace, if you just put in the search engine, Drugs in the Workplace Drug Education Network, you'll find that YouTube. So the other training that we have, this prototype training that a team member has developed at DEN, is called Elephant Training. And so we think it is really important to raise awareness of the impact of mental health and drugs and alcohol in the workplace. And so this program has been designed to encourage workplace safety and assist in those conversations and that awareness by forging safer and healthier workplaces. So why the name Elephant Training? Well, I guess it is about the elephant in the room. So, you know, that one that goes noticed but not addressed in many workplaces. And the idea was that it was aiming to capture attendees' interest. So it's not necessarily going to generate pushback or resistance if it was drugs in the workplace, for example. And it really does look at mental health issues and the fact that they are often co-occurring with substance use issues as well. And it really is focusing on the fact that each and every worker is responsible for the safety of their colleagues. And as I was saying before, this is a message that is acceptable in the workforce. And it helps employees to understand how they can be part of building safer and healthier and more successful workplaces. So if you're interested in finding out more about that training, I'll be providing an email contact so that you can make an inquiry and we can tell you more. So what about workplace drug testing? So of course there are some industries in Tasmania where workplace drug testing is mandated, and there may be other workplaces that are considering implementing workplace drug testing. And so Ken Pidd, who is based with NCETA, National Centre for Education and Training on Addiction, he wrote a paper called Workplace Drug Testing Evidence and Issues. And he looked at a lot of research around acceptability of workplace drug testing programs, effectiveness of testing, and what is going to be best practice considerations if you need to implement workplace drug testing. And so his research and delving into this subject, what he found was that it's really important to have transparency. It's really important to uphold employee rights and also have a clear rationale. And again, that links in with safety for staff in the workplace. And what he concluded was that any program, it needs to be justified. So is it going to actually address an identified risk? It needs to be fair. And that comes back to the idea of communication. So are all employees aware of the drug testing programs that you have in place? And do they know how that drug testing program is going to work? As well as being fair, it needs to offer counselling. So it's not just going to be focused on a punitive outcome, but that counselling could be offered as an option for people if they test positive. He also argues that it needs to target safety-sensitive roles. So, you know, what is the risk for someone who is maybe in the service industry, if they're just serving customers, for example? What he also found was that employee input is really key to being able to develop a workplace drug testing program. So where employees have the opportunity to provide input around how that will be rolled out, there is a lot less pushback and a lot more acceptability. Right of appeal, obviously, really important, and being and that the program needs to be well communicated. So that's about educating the workforce as well. So these are some more resources that the network has produced, and we have found that the Rough Guide has been a really great resource for providing a tool for people to really understand about standard drinks. So in your workplace, for example, if you have a zero tolerance policy around alcohol, this might be a useful tool to provide your staff so they can work out, because this allows them to look at a whole range of different drinks and very easily calculate how many standard drinks they've had, and then they can have awareness around how long it's going to take them for those drinks to be cleared from the system. So these tools are available on the website. And this other resource here, Wiser and Older, Safer Drinking Throughout Life. Sorry, that's not very clear there. But this resource we produced and is also available to really highlight, especially for older people, the changes in metabolism around alcohol and how that can impact on health and cause a whole range of symptoms that people may not necessarily link to alcohol consumption. And even more so in situations where people may be taking medications, which is often the case as people get older, they're prescribed more medications, they might be drinking alcohol and not recognising some of the issues, health issues, that may be impacting on them in the workplace. So this resource talks through likely reactions that people might experience if they're combining alcohol and medications, and how to have a healthier relationship with alcohol. We also have this wallet card here, which is an overdose wallet card. And the reason why I've included this is that it also has service numbers like the Alcohol and Drug Service. It provides information around risk of overdose. So it's a way of educating the workforce around that. But it also is a nice discrete resource, so it can easily be popped into someone's wallet and used when needed. We also have the Drug Education Network number on there as well. The Drug Education Network website, as I mentioned, we are launching an updated version of our website next month. So you're welcome to check out the website now, but we invite you to come back and check it out again. Because we're going to have a more user-friendly version for you. But what you'll find is that there are a number of resources on there that are available for you to order for use in the workplace. And we also have everybody's.business. So this is a website that's going to be launched, newly launched, and it's basically a curated library of information and resources around minimising harm from drugs for everyone in the community. And so this will also be launched. And what we are also intending to do is showcase champion stories about good prevention efforts wherever they're happening in Tasmania. So we're really keen for people to get in touch and let us know about that. And we can share that on the website. And so the training and the resources that I've talked about, you can certainly email us and we can provide information, we can provide resources for your workplace. And so I guess just to kind of summarise what I've talked about in this session today is that we see that workplaces really offer a great opportunity to do really good prevention, to reinforce those positive social norms and develop a healthier workplace and a safer workplace. We think that communication and education of staff is really, really key to being able to inform your workforce so they feel better equipped, more empowered to fulfil their roles at work, but to do that more safely, and to know that if they need to get help for any issues of drug misuse, that those opportunities are there. So I'll finish now, but I'm wondering if there are any questions.
Spoke a little bit about challenging behaviours and that might be some training that would be available for staff. What sort of behaviours would that sort of training cover?
Yeah, so we have had workplaces approach us to say that sometimes they might be dealing with clients in a workplace that are presenting with challenging behaviours, and I guess, you know, what we've seen, there's been a bit of an increase in what people recognise as behaviours associated possibly with methamphetamine intoxication. So those behaviours can look like quite aggressive, or where people might be feeling that they're out of control, or showing signs of restlessness or anxiety, potentially losing contact with reality. So these kinds of behaviours, we can offer training to help staff deal with that for clients, but also in the situation where there may be staff on site that are exhibiting those behaviours. So how can you de-escalate those behaviours and support staff members to feel safe in doing that? Because that has been an issue that's been flagged up more frequently in the last 18 months. Sure. Well, I'll finish there, and thank you, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Maria. Our next session will be at 11 o'clock, so everybody out there, if we just wait on till 11 o'clock, we'll have our next session titled Psychological Health and the Impact on Workplaces. Thank you.